Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I would like to point out that the British Sign Language interpretation of proceedings is available to watch on parliamentlive.tv. So we now start with Sir Robert Neal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I know that the Prime Minister will report later in more.
Has been away a long time. Question 1. Try again.
Speaker, it's only 15 years in my case.
Need another 18.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today marks 5 days since the murder of our friend and colleague Jo Cox. My thoughts, and I'm sure those of the whole House, are with her family and friends. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure that the House will wish to join me in offering our thanks and best wishes to Sir Roy Stone, who is leaving the Government Chief Whip's office and the Civil Service. He's worked for 13 Chief Whips and for over 20 years has played an invaluable role in delivering the Government of the Day's legislative programme. We wish him well. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Sir Robert Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure we would all wish to associate ourselves with the Prime Minister's remarks in relation both to Jo Cox and Roy Stone. The Prime Minister, I know, will report later to the House in more detail on the G7 summit, which I know President Biden described as extremely collaborative and successful. In taking forward the agenda, and in particular that part of the agenda of the summit, which calls for us to work to uphold the rule of law and respect for an international rules-based system, will he bear in mind and task all parts of government to promote the great asset that we have in English common law and in the expertise and reputation for integrity of our judiciary and legal systems? Will he make sure that those willing assets are harnessed in the pursuit of that G7 agenda, be it through writing commercial contracts with English law as a jurisdiction or helping through our expertise developing countries and markets?
Prime Minister.
I thank my right honourable friend for his question. He raises a very important and vital sector of our economy, our legal services industry, and our judicial system, which is admired around the world. One of the reasons that we're capable of attracting so much inward investment into this country, Mr. Speaker, but also one of the key exports, Mr. Speaker, that we've been able to promote just recently, thanks, for instance, to our free trade deal with Australia.
We now come to the Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join with the Prime Minister's remarks in relation to Sir Roy Stone? This week also marks the 4th anniversary of the Grenfell fire tragedy, where 72 people lost their lives. It's frankly an outrage that there are still more than 200 high-rise flats with Grenfell-style cladding, and many leaseholders are trapped in homes that are neither safe nor sellable. The best way to mark this tragedy is not with words, but with action, and I urge the Prime Minister finally to end the cladding scandal. Mr. Speaker, as the Prime Minister has already said, today is the 5th anniversary of the death of our dear friend and colleague Jo Cox. Jo had already changed so many lives for the better. She was passionate about creating a fairer, more just world. I know she would have gone on to achieve so much more, and that she would have been so proud of the work of her foundation and what it's doing in her name. Jo and I were in the same intake into this House. We were friends and our children are around the same age. And there's not a day that goes by when we don't miss Jo. And I know I speak not just for these benches, but for many across the House, when I say that today we remember Jo. Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister recognise that his decision to keep our borders open contributed to the spread of the Delta variant in this country?
Prime Minister.
No, Mr. Speaker. I think that Captain Hindsight needs to adjust his retro spectroscope because he's completely wrong. We put India on the red list, Mr. Speaker, on April the 23rd. And the Delta variant was not so identified until April the 28th, Mr. Speaker, and was only identified as a variant of concern on May the 7th. Mr. Speaker, when he criticises this government for wanting to keep our borders open, just remember that he voted 43 times in the last 5 years, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that our border controls were kept in the hands of Brussels, Mr. Speaker.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, this is absurd. I have, on 7 occasions at PMQs, raised the question of the borders with the Prime Minister. They're all marked up in the transcript. They're all there in Hansard, Prime Minister. Time for a better defence. Your defence is as bad as your border policy. And Mr. Speaker, this is the Prime Minister talks about the dates. Let's go through the dates. On March the 24th, a new variant was reported in India. On the 1st of April, India was reporting that over 100,000 new infections were rising a day and rising. But the Prime Minister kept India off the red list until the 23rd of April. In that time, 20,000 people came into the UK from India. What on earth did the Prime Minister expect would be the consequences of that? The British people did their bit by following the rules and getting vaccinated, but the Prime Minister squandered it by letting a new variant into the country. That was not inevitable. It was the consequence of his indecision. If the Prime Minister disagrees with me, and he answered the first question no, what is his explanation as to why Britain has such high rates of the Delta variation? What's his explanation?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, there's a very simple reason why the UK generally has a better understanding of the variants in this country, and that's because we do 47% of the genomic testing anywhere in the world, Mr. Speaker. And I really think that he should get his facts straight, because the Delta variant, as I've said, was identified in this country on April the 28th. And I have a document on which I believe the Leader of the Opposition is relying, Mr. Speaker, in which he says that the Delta variant, it seems to be published by someone called David Evans, General Secretary of the Labour Party, saying that the Delta variant was identified on April the 1st, Mr. Speaker. He says B1617 was designated under investigation on April the 1st, the Delta variant. Mr. Speaker, that is not the Delta variant. That is the Kappa variant, Mr. Speaker. It's a Gamma, Mr. Speaker, for the Labour Party. There's a difference. The Delta variant, as it happens, is seeded around the world in 74 countries and sadly is growing. But there's a difference between those countries and this country, Mr. Speaker. In this country, we've vaccinated almost 79% of the adult population and given 2 vaccinations to 56%, a programme that he would have stopped, Mr. Speaker, by keeping us in the European Medicines Agency.
Keir Starmer.
The question was, what's his explanation for our high rates of the Delta variant? Answer there came none, other than apparently we understand the variant. The data is very, very clear. Our NHS has been doing an amazing job with the vaccine rollout. But while the NHS was vaccinating, he was vacillating. It's because of his indecision that our borders stayed open. It's because of his indecision that India stayed off the red list. It's because of his indecision that in that period 20,000 people came to this country from India. Mr. Speaker, the consequences are now clear. The rate of the Delta variant is much higher here than in other countries. And we learned today that, tragically, once again, the UK has the highest infection rate in Europe. We did not want to top that table again. Mr. Speaker, if his borders policy is so strong, how does the Prime Minister explain that?
Mr. Speaker, I think for the ease of the House, he should begin by pulping his document, in which he incorrectly identifies what the Delta variant is. Mr. Speaker, we took the most drastic steps possible to put India on the red list on April the 23rd, before that variant was even identified. And the big difference between this country and the rest of Europe, he loves these comparisons, Mr. Speaker. It shows his instincts. But the big difference is that we've had the fastest vaccine rollout anywhere in Europe. We have a very, very high degree of protection, and it's thanks to the vaccine rollout, thanks to the fantastic efforts of the NHS, that we have now, and we can continue, with one of the most open economies and societies in Europe, and get on with our cautious but irreversible roadmap to freedom, Mr. Speaker.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, if the Prime Minister put as much effort into protecting our borders as he does coming up with ridiculous excuses, the country would be reopening next week. But even now, what do we know? The Delta variant is responsible for 90% of infections in this country. He's persisting with a traffic light system that doesn't work and won't stop other variants coming in. Mr. Speaker, after so many mistakes and with the stakes so high, why doesn't the Prime Minister do what Labour is calling for? Drop the traffic light system, get rid of the amber list, secure the borders and do everything possible to save the British summer?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, he doesn't even know what the Delta variant is, we have the toughest border measures anywhere in the world, and we will continue. We have 50 countries on the red list, Mr. Speaker, and if he's now saying that he wants to stop all transit, all traffic, all travel to and from this country, then it's yet another flip-flop from the Labour leader of the opposition, yet another totally unintelligible flip-flop, Mr. Speaker. If he wants to close this country down to travel, which is what I understood him to be saying, then it's not only yet another flip-flop, but it's also totally pointless, because we have 75% of our medicines and 50% of our food that comes in from abroad, Mr. Speaker. He's got to adopt a consistent position.
Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, what I've learned, the worse the position for the Prime Minister, the more pathetic he gets. Is he really suggesting that the 20,000 people who came in from India were bringing in vital medical supplies or food? It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. What we were arguing for is for India to be on the red list between the 1st and the 23rd of April. If that had happened, we wouldn't have the Delta variant here. And it's as simple as that. The Prime Minister's former senior adviser got it absolutely right. He said, and I quote, fundamentally there was no proper border policy because the Prime Minister never wanted a proper border policy. The man who was in the room. And it's those in hospitality, in clubs, in pubs, the arts, tourism and travel who are paying the price of the Prime Minister's failure. All they ask is that if they have to keep their businesses closed, they get the support that they need. But where is it? Business rate relief is being withdrawn from the end of this month, affecting 750,000 businesses. Furlough is being phased out. Mr. Speaker, in Wales, the Labour government has acted by extending business rate relief for a year and providing new support for those affected. When is the Prime Minister going to do the same for businesses in England?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we're proud of the support we've given to businesses up and down the country, and the whole point about the cautious approach that we are taking is to continue support both with furlough and with support through business rates, through grants of up to £18,000, the support from councils. All of that is continuing. But what we're also seeing is we're seeing businesses slowly recovering, and the growth in the economy in April was 2.3%. Card spending over the bank holiday weekend was actually 20% above pre-pandemic levels, Mr. Speaker. I know how tough things have been, and we will look after business throughout this pandemic. But thanks to the vaccine rollout, thanks to the cautious steps we are taking, we are seeing a shot in the arm for business across the country, and we will look after them all the way.
Keir Starmer.
Speaker, yet again, it's not what the government has done, it's what's needed now in light of the decision that was taken this week. Hospitality UK says the sector will lose £3 billion because of the delay and that 200,000 jobs could be at risk. That's not what has been done, it's what's needed now, Prime Minister. And the Federation of Small Businesses warns the government is being dangerously complacent. I think we've just seen an example of that. Mr. Speaker, we all want these restrictions to be over, for our economy to be open, for businesses to thrive. But the Prime Minister's indecision at the borders has blown it. And the problem with everything the Prime Minister says today, both what he says at dispatch box and also what he mutters, is that we've heard it all before so many times. Last month, March, he said we could turn the tide in 12 weeks. Remember that? Then he said it will all be over by Christmas. Then we were told June 21st would be Freedom Day. Now we're told July 19th is Terminus Day. The British people don't expect miracles, but they do expect basic competence and honesty. And when it comes to care homes, protective equipment or borders, we see the same pattern from this Prime Minister. Too slow, too indecisive, over-promising, under-delivering. After all these failures and mistakes, why should anyone believe the Prime Minister now?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, why should anybody believe the leader of the opposition when he can't when he can't decide what he thinks from one week to the next. He says he has a tough position on borders. Actually, he was attacking quarantine only recently and saying that it was a blunt instrument that should be lessened, Mr. Speaker. What I think the people of this country want to see is a government getting on with the vaccine rollout and getting on with our cautiously irreversible roadmap to freedom. And I'm very pleased, and he should say it again, that we have one of the fastest vaccine rollouts anywhere in the world, certainly the fastest in Europe. It would not have been possible if we'd stayed in the EMA. We would not have been able to control our borders if, as he voted for 43 times, Mr. Speaker, we'd stayed in the EU. We're getting on with the job. We're bringing forward now 23, 24-year-olds for asking them to come forward for their vaccines. I ask everybody to come forward for their second jab. I trust he has had his, Mr. Speaker, and we are delivering on our commitments to the British people. Not only a great outcome at the G7 summit this last weekend in Carbis Bay, but a new free trade agreement with Australia and building back better across our country. We're getting on with the job, Mr. Speaker, and it would be a wonderful thing once in his time as leader of the opposition to hear some support for what the government is doing and some backing up for our approach.
Bob Bristow.